Daydreaming is one of those things that most of us do without even thinking about it. You're sitting in class, at work, on a long bus ride, or even mid-conversation, and suddenly your mind drifts somewhere else. You imagine a different version of your life, a conversation that never happened, a scenario that probably never will. And often, when we snap back to reality, we feel guilty, like we've wasted time, like we should have been more focused, like our wandering mind is some kind of weakness. But the truth is, daydreaming is one of the most fascinating and misunderstood aspects of human psychology. At its core, daydreaming is the brain's way of creating mental space. It's not random, even if it feels that way. Psychologists call it mind wandering, and studies show that it activates something called the default mode network in your brain. This is the system that turns on when you're not focused on the outside world, but instead reflecting inward, on yourself, your memories, your imagination, your future. In other words, daydreaming is the brain's way of making sense of life when you're not actively doing something else. And here's the part people don't realize. Daydreaming is deeply tied to creativity, problem solving, and even resilience. Think about how many breakthroughs or ideas came to people when they weren't working on the problem at all. Einstein used to imagine riding alongside a beam of light, and that thought experiment eventually became the foundation for his theory of relativity. Countless artists, writers, and inventors have credited idle daydreams with sparking their greatest creations. Daydreaming also gives us something we don't get enough of: freedom. In your imagination, you can live 1,000 lives. You can picture the person you want to be, the places you want to go, the conversations you wish you had the courage to start. It's a rehearsal space for your desires, your fears, your hopes. Psychologists even argue that daydreaming helps us prepare for the future. When you play out scenarios in your head, you're essentially training your brain to respond to life before it even happens. But of course, there's a darker side too. Sometimes daydreaming can feel like escape. We use it to avoid reality, to run from discomfort, to live in an imagined world because the real one feels too heavy. That's why people who struggle with loneliness, stress, or depression often report excessive daydreaming. It becomes a coping mechanism, a place to hide when life feels unbearable. But even in that, there's information. The content of your daydreams often tells you what your heart is aching for. It shows you the gap between the life you're living and the life you long for. The danger isn't in daydreaming, it's in getting stuck there. Because no matter how vivid or beautiful your imagination is, it can't replace real life. You can imagine yourself confident, brave, and fulfilled, but unless you take pieces of that imagination and bring them into the real world, you'll always feel the tension of living two lives, the one in your head and the one in front of you. So maybe the question isn't, why do I daydream so much? Maybe the better question is, what are my daydreams trying to tell me? If you always imagine yourself somewhere else, maybe it's because you feel trapped where you are. If you always picture conversations where you speak up, maybe it's because you feel silenced in your real life. If your mind always drifts to scenarios of freedom, adventure, or love, maybe that's your inner compass pointing you toward what you're truly missing. And that's where daydreaming becomes powerful, because it's not just a distraction. It's a mirror. It's showing you the gap between your reality and your potential. And if you pay attention, it can actually guide you. The trick is to not stop at imagination. Let your daydreams plant seeds, but then take the step to water them in reality. If you always imagine painting, maybe you should start. If you daydream about traveling, maybe you should save up for that trip. If you picture yourself in a different career, maybe that's a sign to explore your options. The psychology of daydreaming isn't about escaping life. It's about shaping it. It's the brain's way of saying, this is what matters to me. This is what I crave. This is who I might be. The challenge is having the courage to listen. So the next time you catch yourself drifting off, don't beat yourself up. Ask yourself why your mind went there. Ask yourself what that daydream reveals about you, about what you want, about what you need. Because hidden in those imagined worlds are clues to the life you're capable of creating. Daydreaming shows you your potential, but only you can decide whether it stays in your head or becomes something you actually live.